All right, all right. Hello, everyone out there in, where are we? In social media land. I've been doing so many interviews and so many talk shows this week. I'm like, who am I talking to this week? But welcome everyone out there in social media land. We are the Flint Public Health Youth Academy. I am Dr. Kent Key, and these are our wonderful FIRE interns, mentors, staff, and administrators. And we are here for another episode of A Youth Perspective. We are so excited about creating a platform to elevate youth voice. Youth are not our leaders of the future, they are our leaders of now. And so it is time for us to make sure that every chance we get that we incorporate youth perspective in the things that we have to address as a people, as a community, and as a nation. So we're excited today to talk about oppression and systemic oppression. And we have some wonderful FIRE hosts who will guide us and facilitate today's show. We have the future Dr. Jasmine Hall, and we have the future Dr. Kayla Shannon, and they're going to lead us in a conversation around oppressive systems. And we always, because we're public health, we always encourage people to think, how does these systems play out in affecting your personal health, the health of your communities, and your overall well-being? So that's mental, financial, your social health, your cultural health, your economic health, your physical health, in every dimension of health that we encounter as human beings. So we're excited today. I'm going to quickly turn the show over to them. They're going to get us started. Jasmine, Kayla, you have it.
Hi, everyone. So as Dr. Key said, I'm Jasmine, and I'll be co-hosting with Kayla. I'll start off with a working definition of internalized depression. So according to the Center for Community Health and Development at University of Kansas, when people are targeted, discriminated against, or oppressed over a period of time, they often internalize, believe, and make part of their self-image, their internal view of themselves, and the myths and misinformation that society communicates to them about their group. So when people from targeted groups internalize these myths and misinformation, it can cause us to feel, often unconsciously, that we are not inherently as worthy, as capable, as intelligent, beautiful, good, things like that, as people outside of that group. So then they turn the experience of oppression or discrimination inward. They begin to feel that the stereotypes and the misinformation that society communicates are true and act as if it were true. This is called internalized depression. This can affect many different groups of people. So women, people of color, working class people, people with disabilities, young people, elders, people of different religions, immigrants, people of different sexualities, and many other groups. However, not all members of groups who are discriminated against or oppressed necessarily turn those stereotypes inward. So to help us understand it a little further, I'll actually start by reading straight from the first chapter of the book, Internalized Oppression, The Psychology of Marginalized Groups by E.J.R. David and Annie O. Durthik, which is available for download by Springer Publishing, and we will put that link in the chat. So it says, a large proportion of non-European women, approximately 77% in Nigeria, 59% in Togo, 50% in the Philippines, 45% in Hong Kong, 41% in Malaysia, 37% in Taiwan, and 28% in Korea, and 27% in Senegal use skin whitening products. The World Health Organization considers this a worldwide health concern, focusing primarily on physical health consequences. The WHO linked skin whitening products, especially those with dangerous amounts of mercury, to scarring, skin rashes, kidney failure, as well as psychological disorders such as anxiety and depression. Consequently, the WHO called for policy changes to control the amount of mercury in these products. Although these are troubling health concerns, and although the policies were necessary, framing the problem this way is limited and problematic. This limited conceptualization hides the fact that an important contributor to the problem is oppression and internalized oppression, phenomena men, women, and children throughout the world experience. Conceptualizing the problem The phenomenon as a mercury problem calls for a simplified solution to eliminate mercury from skin whitening products. It is implied that desiring to look more white is acceptable as long as it's done without mercury or other substances that may negatively affect health. By keeping oppression out of the conversation, it makes it appear as though the problem and the blame belong completely to the individuals, like they aren't satisfied with themselves or they're consuming harmful chemicals. So alternatively, if we frame the problem as oppression, then we must necessarily look for factors outside of the individual, historical and contemporary socio-political factors that may influence the use of such products. Furthermore, it will become clear that the problem is more than just racial oppression, but also cultural oppression and its other forms, sexism, heterosexism, etc. Hence, the problem will be viewed as more than just a desire to have lighter skin, but a desire and preference for Western culture and worldview. By framing the problem as internalized oppression, it will become clear that the problem also involves a devaluation or inferiorization of oneself and one's group. It will also become clear that the health implications go far beyond just physical health to also include mental health. Thus, by conceptualizing the problem more broadly and more accurately as internalized depression and not just mercury exposure, it becomes clear that this is an even larger worldwide health concern. It is not just a mercury problem, and it is not just a concern among people who happen to have darker skin. It is about oppression and internalized oppression, and it is a concern for many oppressed, marginalized, and devalued groups throughout the world. Kayla?
Thank you, Jasmine. So Jasmine just gave us a quick overview and working definition of what internalized depression is, as well as a serious example that is impacting people of color internationally. And so now that we've heard that, I want to know, are you all aware of other examples, and could you provide us with some other examples that you've seen of internalized depression in marginalized communities? Tomas.
Hello. First of all, thank you everyone for having me to be a part of this needed conversation, especially during this time where we're bringing a lot of different topics into the spotlight as far as oppressive systems in America. But sometimes we fail to highlight how we might take these practices and implement within ourselves, and that's not right. Self-racism, self-hate.
Yes.
On Snapchat saying, "Oh, I wish I was light-skinned," or light-skinned women, light-skinned men be like, or light skin be like this. That's a prime example I know that Jasmine was just highlighting. But another thing is we have to stop trying to word it good, but like trying to be white, or more importantly, trying to consider being successful or speaking articulate as white. I've noticed too many times, if you see a black or brown person having a strong vocabulary, or using large words, or dressing fancy, or whatever you would like to call it, they're labeled as, oh, they're acting white, they're too white. Oh, you read books, you white. Since why do we have to label being successful or being educated as white? You know, that seems kind of hateful within itself, that you're kind of looked down upon if you're trying to be educated, you know, and that's not right, you know. So I think that we really need to address that, because even though to some it might be like a little joke or comment, those have like truth behind them too, and it can really never know the intention versus impact. So I think that that's something very important to highlight. I've seen in the Latino community, like Afro Latinos are sometimes looked down upon. People have certain names for them, or the lighter skinned people, the güeros and stuff, they be trying to call them certain names, you know? So I think that that's something important to address. But I just really want to highlight that we need to stop trying to associate being successful as being white. You have to try and have white qualities in order to be successful, or be labeled white if you are more, like I said, articulate or have a stronger vocabulary, because they didn't invent that. You know what I mean? So I just want to put that out there.
I would like to add to what Tomas is saying. What he's talking about is internalized racial oppression. And that is a term that has been coined for years when we talk about identity, when we look at the oppression that identity has created amongst all groups across. So some have internalized superiority, some have internalized inferiority. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in The Miseducation of the Negro, he wrote that by the age 2, African-American children hate being Black. It's internalized, it's subconscious. And then if you look at in the 1970s, 60s or 70s, Dr. Henry Clark created the Black Doll study. And that study was looking at where they would get an African-American child, and they would put, young children like kindergarten, first grade, pre-K type, and they would put a Black doll and a white doll in front of them, and they would ask questions like, who's the pretty doll? Who's the ugly doll? Who's the good doll? Who's the bad doll? Who's the smart doll? Who's the dumb doll? They would go through this series of questions, and everything that was good, that Black child would point to the white doll, and everything that was bad, with shame in their body, you could see it, they would point to the doll that looked like them. And that's because racism started with creating a caste system where some groups are ascribed one value versus another. And so I hear you, Cole. I hear you, Tomas, when we talk about, and to me, I don't even call it acting white. It's because I have white friends who have some of the best grammar, then I have some white friends who cannot conjugate a verb to save their life. And so in reality, I just hit them back with that. I've had some people, it was mainly older European Americans that would say to me, oh, you speak so well. That is great. And I said, oh, well, I'm pleasantly surprised you speak as well too. I just give it right back to them, but this thing about racial oppression and how it plays out with colorism and how we treat each other and how we view each other, but more importantly, how we view ourselves, that's part of this whole mechanism called racism. And it's doing what it was designed to do. And we got to break that.
Yes, I think you both made great points. I also want to input that I think a great example of internalized oppression was exemplified during the 2016 presidential election when Hillary was running. I believe that was 2016. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, it was 2016, and you had people literally in interviews, women who were like, "Oh, she can't be president. What if she has a hot flash or something? We might go to war." And then you ask a question like, "But haven't all the wars that have ever happened been started by men?" And then they're like, "Yeah, but she'll be emotional." And you're like, but having all the so that's a prime example of the ways in which we take on and internalize the messages that are consistently reinforced by American systems and norms. Another example that I would say is victim blaming. When someone is victimized in a situation of sexual assault, oftentimes you will hear people asking the question, well, what were they wearing? Oftentimes, specifically with women, or women or people who present femininely. Well, what were they wearing? Well, why were they by themselves? Well, they must have been asking for it if they were, well, did they? And it's like, this goes back into, in what world would you ever, if somebody got shot, and they were out on the street and they got shot, are you going to be like, well, what were they wearing when they got shot? Must have been asking to get shot. Like that's not how that works. And so I think these are examples, once again, of the ways in which the repetition of these norms into our ears begin to affect and impact the way that we perceive the world. Would anyone else like to add to that question about examples that you've seen of internalized oppression?
I think, I just have briefly the code switching, which you were talking about a bit earlier, and how now I don't even recognize the way I used to speak before. I had to keep code switching and never turn it off. That was just a little comment I had about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think we've actually seen this some in like TV shows, right? How like sometimes there will be like a Black person or a person of color who's working in an office and they've done all the work to try to assimilate into the culture. And then someone else comes in who is simply acting like themselves, and they feel almost like like afraid as if like, oh no, I don't want to be associated with that person who is at the same professional level, possibly, who has done the same work that they've done to get there, but who has chosen not to assimilate, who has chosen not to take on the burden of other people's comfort. And so I think that's a great example. Would anyone else like to add to that?
I'll share. What comes to mind for me is kind of youth, teenagers, growing up in communities that are under-resourced and really under-invested in, and under-supported, growing up to not really believe that anyone cares. And then obviously in this situation with Faya and you all have, that internal drive to do things differently, and you know that you're loved and cared for, but not everyone has that. And some people decide, okay, I'm just going to give up. I'm not going to try because nobody's investing in me. And so you see that kind of that cycle continue with young people sometimes. And there are so many other examples. You have women. I know there was a study, and I forget where it was, but they, had like a math or some type of test like that. And of course, the stereotype is that women are not as good in things like math as men. And they kind of brought that stereotype up before the test, and they saw the difference between they only had two genders, but the difference between the guys and the girls on how they did in that test, just based on what they internalized about themselves. So that's another example.
And I think it's safe to say that across all the isms, we see some type of oppression system working. So whether it's gender oppression, whether it's racial oppression, those that have handicaps, ableism, ageism, there's levels of oppression across kind of all of those many facets, and it's systemic. And I think that what we as Faya and as these young brains and young geniuses that we have, we're going to come up with ways to dismantle these systems. Tasha, I think you were saying something. I'm sorry, I spoke in front of you. Saw your hand up.
No, you're good. You were talking to just hearing some of the stuff you were talking about, like the different oppression types. It just kind of reminded me of I have a really close friend I've known for like 10 years, and she's a disabled amputee, and she's already, she's been oppressed her whole life because, people look at her and think she can't do anything, and that she just needs to sit back and let other people do things for her. And I'm like, she's fully capable of doing other things, and she's been trying to get a job for years, and they instantly see that she's an amputee and don't want nothing to do with her. And they're like, oh, nope, she can't do this. I don't want her. And, she can talk, she can do whatever. Literally, the only thing that can stop her is if her walker gets stuck on a rock, but that's it. She can do anything else everyone else can do. And it just sucks that the world views it that way. It's kind of it kind of makes you think that you're not good enough for anyone or anything. It puts a lot of mental weight on people, like a lot of anxiety, depression. I struggle with that a lot as well. Because especially since I grew up, I grew up pretty smart and stuff, but, I had to work for a lot of the stuff I have now, and seeing someone do something that I did, but just as easy, and then them getting a gold star, but me spending years on it, just kind of makes me think that, will I just not be good enough? Because, this person's working the easiest job ever, and I'm working hard, and I'm not getting what's the word? Not renowned. Yeah, I'm not getting that I need. It hurts, but you get what I'm saying.
And really quick before to go to Tasha's point, she just made the connection to the impact of systemic oppression to health, the anxiety, the stress, the mental anguish that it caused. And we know when we're constantly stressed, when we're constantly under anxiety, when we're constantly depressed, our body unleashes imbalances in chemicals that then start impacting our vision, our heart, our blood pressure, and so many things. It's like a domino effect. It's all connected.
It messes with you so much mentally that it physically makes you sick. And it also gives you that thing of wanting to be perfect, which I believe perfect isn't a thing. There's always room for improvement on everything. It makes you want to become a perfectionist and say, I have to do this better so people can not, push me back. They can finally
Mhm.
notice me. I can finally be the vision that the person that they want me to be.
And
And
this is, yeah.
it's the whole the whole thing. Practice makes perfect. Practice don't make perfect. You're gonna always get pushed back no matter what you do, but you got to do what's best for yourself.
Yeah, I can identify with a lot of what Tasha has said there, being older. So, because I've lived through most of that, and watched it happen. But in this society, one of the things that um, this society promotes is that there's always going to be somebody on top and somebody on the bottom, and they use the otherisms to make you the one on the bottom. And it has nothing to do with your ability, how you look, how you dress, any of those things. It is a power, it's the power struggle by those who have the power, who don't want to release it to other people. And when we begin to realize that oppression is is about power, it's about pushing those who seem to have the least power down so that they cannot rise up and they cannot be all that they are supposed to be. That until we break through that, we're going to constantly have someone thinking, I'm better than. I might be different, but I don't have to be better than. I don't have to be less than either because I'm different. I'm just different.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And I think also the phenomena, I see you, Tomas, I'll come to you. I think also the phenomena that we're referring to is learned helplessness, right? Like over a period of time when you are repeatedly shown that you are ultimately powerless, or regardless of what you do or you say or how hard you work, that the outcome is going to be the same, if not similar, like Taisha said, of seeing other people surpass you doing less work, seeing people who being told once again repeatedly that certain stereotypes are true of yourself. Over time you learn that this is just the life that I have to live, and I think that's the phenomena that we're speaking to. I also want to add in that Cole says in the chat, another example would be every stereotype regarding generations. So this is once again going to ageism, like people tell younger generations that your generation is this, and this, and my generation was this, and your generation is this, which is so funny because every generation thinks the next generation was worse. And I'm like, where did we come from? But that's besides the point. Cole also says in the chat, I remember the Mythbusters testing the knowledge of women with different hair colors, and they didn't find any margins of variance based on hair color. So that speaks to the stereotypes of like blondes are whatever versus like brunettes. And Taisha says, it also impacts your self-worth, which gradually lowers it. And Monisha agrees with that. So I think all of us clearly have a great understanding of what internalized oppression looks like and how it manifests. I'd like to move forward to our next question, which is, have you personally ever been on the receiving end of marginalized oppression? Or I'm also going to loop in, have you ever unintentionally imposed unhealthy assumptions onto marginalized community members because of the norms you've been taught? So please speak to both of those experiences. Oh, and Tomas, you can speak to the last question if you had that, and you can also answer the next one because I forgot.
Gonna press my voice. No, I'm just playing, no worries. But I guess it kind of correlates with both. I've been a witness and I've kind of experienced it from both sides. See, this is a very interesting topic. Mexicans and Mexican Americans. Though we might seem like one, there is a big divide. And it's an unfortunate divide. It's an irrelevant divide, a divide that doesn't need to be existent, but it's there. Mexican Americans, they look down on Mexicans because they don't speak English. They're not American enough. You're in America. You're supposed to speak English. You're not patriotic. And then sometimes I've heard of Mexicans looking down on Mexican Americans saying, oh, you don't speak Spanish. You're not Mexican. You ain't part of us. Oh, you're white. You're one of them. So I've experienced it. Me, a Mexican American, sometimes people will make comments about that, oh, you're not me. I'm currently learning Spanish right now. Shout out to Senora Garcia at GEC, but I'm currently learning Spanish. And I remember during my journey sometimes, and even before then, people will be like, oh, you're not Latino enough. You're not one of us because you don't speak Spanish. So, you know, that kind of made me feel bad. And it started making me think it to myself that you're right, that they're the real people, you know? And it just hit different. And it's unfortunate that within your own group, you experience this. But me, I will call it out on both sides, because the Mexican Americans are just as guilty as the Mexicans. And it's unfortunate. And I feel like this really needs to be discussed during near Cesar Chavez Day. You know, he was a Mexican American activist who not only fought for Mexican Americans, but the Mexicans as well. It seems like people are worried that if you're associated with one or the other, it's going to ruin your reputation. But no one cares. Look at Cesar Chavez. Everybody from both sides try to live up to his legacy and promote his legacy. The Latinx Center, I know my dad, Tomas, and Asa and them, they're trying to plan an event, which you guys should check out. On March 26th, I'll give you more details, but let me get back to the point. My point is that he's a historical figure that advocated for both sides, for the agricultural workers who were being treated unfairly through the grape strikes and all kinds of other actions. But that's just something I wanted to highlight, that within our own groups, it's unfortunate, but there's a divide. And I'm sure it happens with Jamaicans and Jamaican Americans, Arabs and Arab Americans, everybody. There was a show, for example, I know it's a show, it ain't real, but it's called Grand Army. They talk about like social issues and stuff like that on Netflix. And one of the girls was speaking Chinese, and the other Chinese girls who like grew up speaking it were looking down on her, saying that she's not speaking it right. And then, yeah, I just had to put that out there, that within our own, there's divides that need to be addressed. So.
Yeah, and that goes to African Americans as well. You would think, well, there's no, yes, there is. There's light skin and dark skin and medium brown skin and those on one side of the track and those on the other side of the track. We're always, as humans, seem to be trying to find things that separate us instead of trying to find the likenesses that we have. And you know, when Barack Obama became president, no Black person that I know of said he a light-skinned dude. You know what I'm saying? We all embraced him. And so I get what Thomas is saying about Cesar Chavez, that as we begin to see people who are different do things that we want to do, I think that will help us to break through some of those stereotypes. And for a person like me, within my own family, with the spectrum of color in my own family, it's difficult. It was difficult. Who got treated the best by the elders, who might have treated the darker skinned kids better than the lighter skin, or sometimes the lighter skinned kids got treated better than the kids with long hair got treated better than the kids with short hair. I mean, we had all that kind of stuff going on when I was growing up. I don't know if it happens so much with you guys now, but it was all happening back in the day that I was growing up. And half the time, you didn't know, and we forget that we have those recessive genes where we can come out looking like anything or anybody, pretty much.
And I think what Dr. Bailey is saying speaks to colorism within the families. And we know that was institutionally and systematically put in place during slavery. They had what they called the paper bag test. And if you were lighter than the paper bag, you were considered and allowed to serve as a house Negro. And if you were darker skin, you were forced to work out and do the harder labor in the fields. But to Tomas's point, it's the same disparity with Africans. The Africans were taught to hate African Americans, and the African Americans were taught to hate Africa. We were taught that they sold us out, and the Africans were taught that we think we're better than them, and they're not really from the motherland. And so that's part of the strategy of divide and conquer.
Yes, you all made great points, especially tying in Dr. Bailey, as you said, the historical context of especially the ways in which generations have passed down the societal norms. I want to go to Taisha. I saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, I was gonna comment on Sarah on Dr. Bailey's with the whole sorry, the family oppression. I've like experienced that. I have 9 biological siblings, by the way. So, and I'm one of the older ones. It was already hard enough trying to like stay and keep my mom's attention. And it was difficult in school too, because, you know, whenever I got in trouble, I would get in trouble with my siblings. If they did the same thing before even I did, they go, "Oh, it's okay. You're younger. It's okay for you to do that stuff. You make mistakes, you make the same mistake." They're like, "Oh, that's a horrible job. You did horrible. Go to your room, go lay down to something." I had to hold cans while squatting. That hurt. But it was that was one thing I experienced. And also with the age thing, I feel like this happens a lot, but parents do it without realizing it. So I'm gonna be 20, and my mom still treats me like I'm 13. So I want to try, you know, being an adult, driving my own car and everything, but she kind of forces me not to. You can't do that. You're not old enough, or you can't do that. I'm still your parent. Go sit back down. I know what's best for you, but how am I able to make my own, learn how to be an adult if I can't make some of my own mistakes? It's okay for you to guide me, but not when you're telling me to not do this. It's better for you to do it for me, for you to, for you to basically push me back to live my life for me.
Yes, great point, Taisha. Speaking once again to the generational impacts of internalized oppression. Khalil, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so I have 5 half siblings, and we are all various shades of black and brown. And I didn't notice this when I was younger, but as I got older, I started noticing that we were treated way differently because it was also a gender thing. A lot of the girls, because I have 2 sisters, they were treated a lot better than us 4 boys, but all of my brothers are darker than me. And I had not realized that I was actually treated a lot less severely as a child because of that. And it's kind of, I don't know if my mother ever did it like consciously, but it's something I brought up to her once before, and I don't think she ever acknowledged that that actually had like a decent effect on us as we were kids. The way my brothers look at our mother now is different from the way I do, and I guess that's another way that the internalization of that comes out in our own families like that.
Yes, so oh, sorry, really quickly. I just want to say, speaking to the fact that sometimes this happens subconsciously, that sometimes people aren't even actively attempting to be oppressive, but that because these systems have become so normalized amongst us, that it's something that happens without even having to think about it, without even having to make the conscious decision that I'm going to treat a person this way. It's just how you perceive the situation, and that causes your response. But sorry, go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, that is so real. And to that point, I would say one example of being kind of on the receiving end is kind of like, as a woman, feeling like, okay, you know, I need to wear certain types of clothing. This is how I used to think, but I needed to wear, you know, certain types of clothing and be, you know, have a certain level of modesty to avoid unwanted attention from men, unwanted attention, unwanted advances and things like that, and putting that responsibility for other people's behavior and their actions on me and on my wardrobe. And I realized like that is internalizing that misogyny, that so much of toxic masculinity. Another example, and I would say both, I feel like all of these are like on the giving and receiving end, and sometimes to myself. But as a queer person, like, you know, especially if you're Christian, distancing yourself from, you know, if you're like pan or bisexual, it's like, well, I still like men. So like, you know, I'm like 80%. So I'm like kind of straight, you know, I'm going to be more closely aligned with heterosexuality than queerness, and internalizing that and maybe discriminating then against people who are fully gay or people who are trans, and kind of making that like homophobia internal, to, I don't know, justify what's going on in the world. And then the last one was something as a child. So most of us here are aware that kind of like this natural hair thing, there were several women who were like on it from, when they were born, really embracing their natural hair, loving themselves. But for many of us, like myself, when I was 5, I had my first relaxer and my hair was, straight and all this stuff. And I just knew I was popping. But I didn't realize growing up, until I stopped getting relaxers, that was harmful. Like, I'm putting sodium hydroxide, something that I shouldn't even have on my hands, on my scalp every 6 weeks, and doing that harm to my own body in service of white supremacy, in service of that, that ideal look. And so I'm so excited that so many people choose to not do that, because it is honestly harmful for our bodies to make those, to use those chemicals and to not wear our hair natural. So those are a few examples.
Jasmine, you took the words right out of my mouth, because that's what I was going to use for being on the receiving end.
Oh,
like,
go ahead.
Look, being brown skin, dark skin, having natural hair, like, that's a thing now. That's a thing. Like, it's like, oh, people see you, they're like, yes, queen, you better. When I was in 2nd grade, it was not a thing. It was not a thing. I was ugly.
And people
I was an African booty scratcher. I was all of that. I've been called all the names. I was picked on because my mom refused to straighten our hair. Like, I think when I was younger, I probably had my hair straightened like once or twice. My mom had 4 girls. She was not going through all the work of trying to keep all of our 4C, 4B hair straight on a consistent basis. So I was natural for most of my life. And it was hard, actually, because I grew up in a south suburb of Chicago. And so when I was younger, I was actually in predominantly Black schools, and that's where I was taught it. That's where I got it first, that I was less than because I was natural, that I looked like a boy. But then I transitioned into a predominantly white schools. I was in predominantly white schools from probably third grade to my senior year. And it just internalized further and further. And over time, like, I remember my 7th grade year, my mom finally let me straighten my hair. And I was so excited. And like Jasmine said, I swear I was popping. I straightened my hair like every day for like 3 months. It was breaking. It was a whole thing.
Like,
I was messed up.
Ma'am.
But I remember my 8th grade year. So after going through all of that, my 8th grade year, I had to do a big chop. And when I tell you, it was the biggest strike to my ego, because I had to go to this predominantly white school where everybody, I felt like I looked like a boy. Even now to this day, like, people, I get more compliments when my hair is in an afro as opposed to if it's twisted, because when it's twisted, I'm told I look kind of like a boy. I've had people call me sir because my hair was twisted. Now, I don't know about y'all. I don't look like, see, and that's the thing, because when you're younger,
right, I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Look, because when you're younger, you really will internal, and you think maybe I do look like, now I'd be like, look, now you know good and so well.
Like, what's wrong with your eyes?
I don't know what happened. But that's a great point. And then one thing that I wanted to speak about really quickly about unintentionally being on the other end, I didn't realize how much how much I had internalized racism until I ended up on an HBCU campus. And let me tell you, baby, I was my first like month or two, I was like really easily frightened by loud noises. Like I'd be like, oh my gosh, people are yelling, what's going on? I'm like scared because people, turns out Black people just loud. Like it turns out when it's loud, that's just us having fun. Like we're just enjoying ourselves. And so now when I first got here though, like that was something that I really had to adjust to. Like I really would be not necessarily scared for my life or anything like that, but I really thought something was wrong. Like I assumed volume equated to something being wrong or there being an issue. And now I'm just like, oh no, it's just a Friday night. We just excited. Like that's all. That's just normal noises. And so yeah, definitely have been on both sides of that.
Thank you. Before I go to the next question, did anybody have any final responses to being on the giving or the receiving end of internalized depression?
Well,
Because
yeah,
we're going to go into how that plays out. Go ahead.
I don't think that any of us can say that no, I've never been one to do it. I've never been one to receive it. I think we've all had our share of it. I can just go back and think about as Tomas was talking about Mexican Americans, I thought about, yeah, because every time I saw El Camino lowrider, I knew who was driving that. See what I'm saying? And it could have been somebody else, but that was a perception. And maybe you guys don't understand that, but I'm sure somebody on here is old enough to know that that was the preferred vehicle in many of the Hispanic neighborhoods. And so it was automatically assumed that's what that was. That's who that was. That was my perception. I had to deal with that and say, you can't do that. You can't just say that. Just like people today think that if you're driving through the hood and you got a Lexus or Mercedes, you deal drugs. That's not necessarily true. So all of these kinds of things that we preconceived notions that we have internalized, and then we put off on somebody else, and then we try to fight with our counterparts, with white folks, and we're still trying to deal with those conceptions on our own part.
Absolutely. Wow. I see Tashay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I got a little more to add before you go to the next question. Another thing that was another oppression was like obviously in schools it was sports. Like sports as well as like music competitions. So I was in a band, a choir, and I'm gonna be honest with you, they did not really have a lot of African American women doing solos. It was usually like the white females would do the solos, and I mean occasionally they'd let the African American women do it, but it was always always a white woman or male. And it was also like other than sports with like, so I loved football growing up. I loved playing basketball, football, baseball, and I always would wear my hair in cornrows. I liked to dress as a boy. I didn't care to wear girl clothes when I was younger, but I was always like, forced to not play any of the rough games because, oh, you're a girl, you should not be playing that game. Go play with dolls. I always cut my dolls' heads off. But they would just enforce in your head that you're a girl, you shouldn't do all this hard labor, you shouldn't do anything. So go sit back and sit behind a chair behind the desk and do your little office paperwork type thing. Go take care of the kids. That's your job. You go do this type of thing. And for a while, and then I also posted about the whole me wearing where I had to wear certain clothes because I felt like as a kid, my mom would always tell me you can't wear certain clothes no matter your age because men will always look at you. And I'm like, why would my uncle want to look at me? I'm 5 years old, And now, even now, I still struggle with that. I don't really ever wear skinny jeans or any shirts any of my normal size shirts. I always go bigger than what I expect, even hoodies and everything, because I was always like, I always push myself down. Like, I don't want to be seen, because if I'm seen, then I'm going to get unwanted attention and a bunch of other
Mhm.
stuff.
Thank you for sharing that, because I mean, there are so many implications of dealing with internalized depression. Christian, did you want to still share?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I'm gonna move to the next question. So I work at AutoZone, and surprisingly to a lot of older white men, a lot of women work there, a lot of strong, very intelligent women, which just throws them for a loop immediately, which is always fun to see. And when they're, they're questioning, hey, can you put throw a light bulb in my car, can you change a battery? And when the women start getting ready to go, one of my favorite coworkers doing this because it happens all the time because she's short as well. They always go, well, you want to get a man to do it? And she goes in and gets it done immediately. Like she's been in the game for like as long as AutoZone's been around. She knows her stuff. And it throws these older white dudes for a loop so hard. It's always so fun to see that happen because they're like, see, but inflicted to me, I always just get the thing about me being young. I'm a kid, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know anything about cars, and I'll just dump this information on them and tell them what they're wrong. And usually it ends with them just still acting like I'm still wrong because they can't admit that they're wrong. It's the way it is. That's the industry I work in, unfortunately. But with the coworkers I have, I feel so supported. It's so fun to just watch people go, wait, huh? What do you mean? So yeah.
Thank you so much. So we've talked about internalized depression, whether we're talking from gender, from race, from age, from sexuality, ability. We have covered kind of the spectrum. And we've also kind of talked a bit about how it, how that shows up. So let's actually go into how do we heal? How do we heal from the impacts of internalized depression? Because we can talk all day about what it looks like because there are plenty of examples, but what do we do about it? Yeah, so anyone can start. Go ahead, Tasha.
It's one of those things where it's really difficult to try to heal from it because it's been such a generational thing that's been like hammered into your head. But a lot of it is like, due to you needing to be confident in yourself and like, understanding that you are a strong and powerful person. And it takes a lot, because you also need that support group you have, because you're always going to fall back. Trust me. I'm sure all of us have gone from, yeah, we got this. Yeah, oh, I can't do this. What if this person tells me I can't do it? But it's just something you got to learn on your own as well. But also something like there's always people to guide you as well as you internalizing it yourself. Because someone can tell you it, but if you're not internalizing it yourself, believing that you can, knowing that you can, because whatever you put your mind to, you can do it. I'm just saying, if you want to climb Mount Everest, you can climb Mount Everest. But if you can't put your own mind to it, you can't truly help yourself heal from that.
Speak on it. I see you, Tomas. I'm going to just read Cole's comment out, and then we'll go right to you. And then I want to jump in if possible. So Cole said, man, my mom used to get free money because she used to race dudes who would assume she can't drive her Trans Am, help her pay the bills, LOL. So, hey, sometimes, you flip that internalized depression right on its head and get your money. Thank you,
Melissa
Cole.
is a bad mama jamma.
Okay.
She's
Shout out to Miss Melissa Mays. Go ahead, Tomas.
I think this
And then
goes.
Christian.
I'm gonna adjust a couple points, but that's dope though, the Trans Am thing. But I think this goes with all demographics. But you're always your best self when you're you. Don't let those pre-made stereotypes and thoughts like, oh, it's good to be light skinned. Oh, I should be older to be more wiser. Oh, I should be more strong and know about cars and whatever it may be no more Spanish, whatever. You're your best you when you're you. Don't use that energy to try and be someone else or try and shape an image that's not you. Embrace what you are, because you're great. God made you in a perfect image. God, Allah, whoever it is, the creator made you in his image. So appreciate who you are. And yeah, that's just how I believe it. That I know it's way easier said than done, believe me. but you just got to take that initiative and make that start to love yourself. It's all about self-love, really. And I feel like it's important we support Black and brown owned businesses and we help get them to be successful, because therefore it helps to see a Black doll, a brown doll with a little Mexican flag on it or something, or Panamanian or whatever. The minute, it don't matter. It's good to see you on the market. You know, in this terrible capitalist world, it's good to see representation in it, you know? So that, I just want to highlight that. Support your Black and brown owned businesses. So
Yes, thank you, Tomas. Thank you. Christian and then Dr. Bailey.
Well,
And let me know if I miss any hands.
Tomas stole my answer, but well, yeah, just be the best you can be, living by your own standards and making your own, choices instead of making someone else's choices and, setting someone else's standards is what's going to get you through happily, because you won't be happy if you're trying to be someone else other than you. Also, I've also noticed how, what was I going to say? It was, I'm just thinking about the timeline, because we are such a progressive, like the last generations have been so progressive with everything. That's definitely helping, of course. Making things acceptable in general is helping a ton with people, being confident in themselves as well. I mean, I don't remember, I was alive, but I mean, like half a century ago, certain people couldn't marry each other, couldn't love each other, period, without being shunned or assaulted or anything else in the matter. And look where we are now. You can do a lot of things that you would otherwise never imagine if you're back then 50, 60 years ago. So progression is happening, and it's happening quick, which is unfortunate for some of the people that don't want it, but they have no choice. So I'm just gonna keep pushing through.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, one of the things that has always been a good thing to do to help people to heal, regardless, is self-talk. It's having mantras that you say to yourself on a daily basis until you start believing it. Because 90% of what has happened to us is that we believe the lie. And so in order for us to unbelieve that lie, we have to put something else on top of it. And it has to be repeated and repeated and repeated. There are mantras that I say on a daily basis to myself. I still say them today. I started saying them years ago to improve my own thoughts about myself, because I found out that I was my worst enemy, that what I perceived other people doing to me wasn't as bad as what I was doing to myself. And if I was going to become who I wanted to be, then I had to believe in the deeper recesses of self that I could be that, and nothing could stop me, that I could fight through anything. I will never give up and I will never quit. The only thing that will ever hold me back is death. And I can't do that until God calls me. And I still got a purpose. No matter if I sit in my chair all day long, I still got my own purpose. And I carry out what I'm supposed to do. This is and as Dr. Key and I was talking today, I understand my assignment.
You just shook me to my core. I'm shook.
Well, that is what you call, look, that is what you call a mic drop, okay? We can log off. We done.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I want to Jasmine, if it's okay, I want to insert a couple thoughts really quickly. Okay. I think 3 things are important to healing from internalized oppression. One, Dr. Bailey spoke to, so I won't say too much on, is self-awareness. Being able to stop yourself in your tracks, like, is that self-deprecation? Like, is this institutionalized racism that I am? No, I will not continue to perpetuate these thoughts in my mind, in my home, in my body. Like, no. So I think one is self-awareness, and Dr. Bailey spoke to that. I think the second one is solidarity, surrounding yourself with people who will hold you to a standard and hold you accountable to say that No, that's something you were taught. That's not true. That's not who you are. That's what someone told you that you are. That's what someone spoke over you. Having people that will continue to speak life over you and pour into you and say, no, actually, you might have been told that you are one thing, but you are actually another. And let me reinforce like what is true about you. And then I think the third thing is we have got to disrupt these systems. We cannot continue to allow these systems, but because the reason that they are perpetuated is because they have been allowed to last. Not saying that people haven't been fighting against them, because we've been fighting the fight. Look, the fight has been fought and it's still being fought, but that is the work that needs to be done in order for healing to happen. I think one of the examples that we gave was like in one of our previous talks was like putting a band-aid on a broken arm. So and I say that to say we have to get to the core of the issue. We cannot simply, you could have all the mantras in the world, you could have all the community in the world, but if the system remains the same, we will continue to experience the same symptoms of these issues. So we have to get to the core and actually disrupt the systems that are creating these unnecessary stereotypes and cycles in our minds.
Thank you. Wow. You said it. I am going to read a few of the messages that we have in the chat. So Taisha said, don't try to make everyone happy. You will hurt yourself. You can't make everyone happy. So just make the only person you're confident in making happy, yourself. Cole said, true that. The only thing stopping you is you. Tomas said, there is no perfect race. As a matter of fact, race is a social construct made by people who want you to see yourself negatively. Come on. Taisha said, absolutely, Tomas, there is no superior race, no better race. And Cole said, also true that we're all human at the end of the day. You are your worst critic, from Taisha, and your best supporter, from Christian. Dr. Bailey said, we have prepared the ground. Now let's take it to the streets. Absolutely. I want to throw in a few more things around healing. And then if anyone else has something to add, especially if you haven't talked much today, feel free to raise your hand or give us kind of a nod. Kayla talked about having people who speak life into you, who remind you who you are. And one thing personally that I always do, especially in academic spaces where I know that Black women historically have not been welcome, I make sure I find the Black folks. Like there might be, 1 in every 100, but I'm gonna find us, and I'm gonna, connect. We find our affinity groups. I know during my time at Harvard, I was one of 2 Black people in the epidemiology department, and you better believe the other one was my friend from Spelman. So shout out to Kayla, shout out to the Spelmanites. Another thing is therapy. So and Dr. Bailey kind of talked about restructuring kind of those thoughts, those automatic thoughts that come to your mind, or negative self-talk. And therapy is a great way to have help with that. And then finally, and this is again going back to Kayla's point about having people that really speak life into you and remind you who you are. We can raise better children. We can raise children who are aware and who love themselves and who understand their culture and the values that they bring. Same for people that we mentor. I know I don't have kids, but I have a bunch of babies, and I will make sure that my kids know who they are and they're being poured into. So that's another way to help us heal from internalized depression. Would anyone else want to add to that on healing? Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I know we've asked 3 kind of in some more detailed questions. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add to any of the questions or to this topic before we close up in the next few minutes?
I guess before we close out briefly, I just want to say thoughts and prayers to the refugees and poor people of Ukraine and the poor people of Russia who are just being pulled up into this, and everywhere that's
Yes.
experiencing conflict of any sorts. I already know what's going to be the aftermath. We're going to see some people being labeled as poor refugees and other people looked at as criminals and terrorists. And yeah, we're just going to see xenophobia. So I just want to put it out there that you're just educated on it.
Thank you. Thank you. That is, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Bailey says, shout out to the Supreme Court nominee. Yes, yes. I will turn it back over to Dr. Key.
Well, as usual, this has been a dynamic conversation, a lot of effective dialogue, and a lot of useful information. As we know better, we do better, and as we go, we grow. And I think the evolution of us as public health professionals, those of us who are fighting oppression, those of us who are activists and not air fry activists like you all coined on our last meeting. I love that term still. Those of us who are really about the work of addressing oppressive systems that create many of the isms that result in inequities and disparities. We have to really just keep our feet to the ground and stay vigilant and look for opportunities to educate, to have dialogue, to critique, and to have constructive criticism about solutions. And that's where we are. We're not just about talking about it. Now, I mean, we've described many of the reasons for the oppression, but now we have to move to action. And what steps can we do? How can we mobilize against these systems? So again, we thank you all. Thank you all for joining, all of you out there in social media land, for another episode of A Youth Perspective. As you can see, these young people are fired up and they are ready to talk about things that many of their parents and grandparents really may not even feel comfortable talking about. But we'll talk about it for you. Just join our show and support us. Join us again Friday after next, same time, same place. Have a wonderful weekend.